Flying the flag across the Black Country. We are Black Country Radio.
This is the Throstle Club with Norman Bartlam and Bob Downing. And as always, the choir there from the Brummie Road welcoming us to the latest edition of the Throstle Club, the programme that looks back on West Bromwich Albion's long and illustrious past. And this month we're looking at the month of August, of course. That's what in that month, and some of the events and happenings from around that period of time. And with me, as always, is a man from the ex-Sports Argus man whose form rate has always been excellent, and that's Bob Downing.
Hi Norman, how are you?
Yeah, fine, thanks. And with us, as always, twiddling his knobs in the corner, is Billy Spakemon.
I don't think you should say that on radio.
But luckily it is radio, so we can get away with it. And our special guest today is a man who's not a household name, but is well known in Albion circles for his work on the history of West Bromwich Albion. None other than the man called Steve Carr, the man who, along with some of his mates, Billy, actually discovered the Albion were older than the Albion thought they were. So, hello, Steve.
Hello.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us. And our special guest via Zoom we spoke to yesterday was Jim Cumbes. So, lots to get through on this edition of the Throstle Club. West Bromwich Albion choir there, bringing us into the start of the programme. Now, we mentioned that our special guest today is Jim Cumbes. Now, he's a well-known footballer in the 1970s, playing for West Bromwich Albion and also Aston Villa, I think we need to mention. And he also had a nice spell at Walsall under Doug Fraser, the ex-West Bromwich Albion man as well. And it's really interesting talking to him, wasn't it, Bob? Because he was also one of these virtually unique, that you'd think these days. He actually played sport throughout the summer, playing professional cricket for Worcestershire amongst other teams.
That's right. He was. You won't get that now, though, Norm. I mean, Jim Cumbes and other people who played football and cricket, they're very unique now, because basically football is 12 months a year, and no managers would want you to sort of end your season and then go off and play cricket, because you know what can happen with cricket. I mean, you can get broken fingers, all kinds of things. So, yeah, I mean, he is unique. But I'm old enough to remember seeing Jim Cumbes play. He was a fast bowler, a very good fast bowler, and he was quite good.
Yep. So this is a little bit of the interview that we did with him, talking about exactly what we've been talking about, playing cricket and football. But in those days, people like Ted Hemsley, Chris Balderstone, Phil Neal all played cricket as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And of course, there were many before us that did as well. Some were, people like Willie Watts and Arthur Milton were double internationals, which is quite extraordinary when you think of it. I still think there are footballers around that I've seen playing in cricket matches, and I've thought, crikey, this lad's got some ability. But of course, they can't possibly play now. The length of the football season restricts it, and so does the length of the cricket season, because when I was playing cricket, usually the football season finished at the FA Cup final, which was usually May 3rd, 4th, 5th, something like that. And the cricket season only started at the end of April, and then it finished at the end of August, and that was just about when football started. Of course, there was all the pre-season stuff, and I had to do more pre-season when I came into First Division than I did when I was with Tranmere. Sometimes Dave Russell, who was a manager at Tranmere, if we weren't getting relegated or promoted or important, he used to say, well, you can take the last couple of weeks if you like, Jim, and I'll give so-and-so a game, give him some experience. And then he'd ring me in the cricket season and say, we're reporting on July the 10th or whatever it might be, but you take 10 days, finish your cricket there, in 10 days, and then come and join us then, because I know you're fit enough. So
Yeah.
it worked out quite well, really. But Phil Neville was a case in point at Manchester United. I remember.
Phil Neal. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was going to say Phil Neville at Manchester United.
Sorry. Yeah.
He was a really good cricketer. In fact, the chairman of cricket at Lancashire, a fellow called Jeff Ogden, said if he hadn't been such a good footballer, I reckon he'd have played cricket for England, which was quite remarkable. And I remember going over to, I used to, Danny Drinkwood, I can't remember the name now, of the commercial manager at Manchester United. He used to be quite close to, because obviously when I was at Lancashire as sales and marketing manager, having links with Manchester United, they were only 400 yards up the road, and chatting to Danny, and we'd exchange ideas, and it was really good. And I went over one day, and as I went through the door, Alex Ferguson was in front of me. Well, I'd met him a few times before, and he said, "Oh, good morning, Jim." He said, "Are you after Danny?" And I said, yeah. He said, "I'll come upstairs. I'll show you where he is. He's moved his office now." So we were going upstairs, and I thought, well, I'll make some conversation. And I said to him, "How are the Neville brothers doing then?" Because we were only young lads then. He said, "They're doing very well, son." He said, "You can forget the bloody cricket," he said. But yeah, it was a time when you could just about manage it. I think the four of us you've mentioned there were probably about the last four to do it with any meaningful stuff. And even Phil finished a bit earlier than he could have done playing football, simply because he was such a good cricketer and he was on the verge of the England side, really.
Yeah. Now, you were associated with a number of clubs, something like Lancashire, Surrey, but it was Worcestershire that you were most well known for.
Yeah. I started at Lancashire in the early 60s, 1962. But with people like Statham, Higgs, Shuttleworth and Lever in front of me, I wasn't getting much opportunity to play. I played about, 7 or 8 games, but that was over 5 or 6 years. And Geoffrey Howard, who was the secretary at Surrey, had been the secretary at Lancashire when I first started. And he contacted me and said, "How would you like to come down here? We're looking for a seamer. You'll probably get a chance to play far more cricket." So, I spoke to a couple of the senior pros at Lancashire, and Lancashire sort of said, "Well, yeah, if you want to go, we understand the situation." And I went down to Surrey, and it went very well for me. I was there 3 years. But unfortunately, after the third year, I had more or less had to pack it in at Surrey, simply because by then I'd been transferred to West Bromwich Albion. And of course, I was required to go on end of season tours and, start pre-season like everybody else. So the season became shorter. And when you think I had to go down there, find somewhere to live and then get myself into condition to play cricket, it was hardly worth doing. And so mutual agreement, I left Surrey. I came back to Lancashire for a year. They asked me, "Would you come back and do cover?" And I played a few games then, just as cover for the other seamers. And then I used to play a couple of games for West Bromwich Dartmouth, who, are just up the road from the Albion ground. And I used to play a couple of games at the beginning of the season and a couple of games at the end of the season, just to keep in nick, so to speak. And Duncan Fernley was playing at Dartmouth. And he said, "Look," he said, "you're a Midland lad now. You've moved to Villa." This was just after I moved to Villa. He said, "Why don't you come play at Worcester?" He said, "You play more, you'd play regular cricket. We just had Jim Standen and he's now retired." So I went down and spoke to them, and lo and behold, I went to Worcester then and had 10 very happy years there. It worked out quite well, in the latter half of my football career, and then I had a cricket career after that.
But didn't you win the county championship, didn't you, in the Gillette Cup?
Yeah, 1974. I didn't play many games then, because that was when Villa were having their really good run, and we were doing well in the League Cup. And I was late sort of reporting. So I think I played about 8 or 9 games instead of the normal 15 or 16 I would have played. But we did win the championship, you're right. And that was a great boost, really. Yeah. I mean, it was quite an interesting period, because we won the championship in 74 with we won the League Cup in 1975, and of course it was such a successful period that I was involved in, which was great, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the League Cup 6 months after we'd won the county championship.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
It was the local paper. I think it was actually the Evening Mail that took the photo at the start of the following football season, and they had a photograph of me with the League Cup and the championship, one in one hand and one in the other.
Yeah.
I've still got that photograph at home. It is a great photo, actually.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. So the Sports Argus was the sports paper at that time. Then did you ever keep any cuttings and things like that?
I never kept cuttings,
No.
My mother kept them for a short time, but it wasn't something I particularly sort of felt I needed to. I don't know. I just didn't keep cutting.
You didn't, yeah.
Yeah. My mother didn't keep many because when I got to the league, I'll tell you a story about that. When I got to the League Cup final, my brother said he was going to hire a minivan and take the family down. So I'd got two sisters, you see, and two brothers-in-law, and my mother, and there was a couple of friends wanted to go, but my mother hadn't said she was going to go, so he went to see her, and he said, "Are you coming down with us, Mum, to the final? Your son's in the final." And she said, No. He said, "Look, not many people do this. Not many people get to a cup final. You must go and watch him play." So she said, "Oh, all right then." She said, "But look, playing this football and cricket, it's all very well, but when's he going to get a serious job?"
Serious job indeed. It really was a serious job, though, wasn't it?
It was.
You can understand his mother thinking a bit like that, though. Can't you?
Yeah, a lot of them did. I mean, it's interesting as well about the dog.
Yeah.
I mean, she said get a serious job, and we mentioned to him as well about the dog he caught. He could have been a dog catcher.
Well, funny you should mention that, because here is Jim Cumbes talking about the day he caught a dog on the pitch. When your mum said about get yourself a decent job, you could turn around and say you was once a dog catcher.
Yes, I was. That's right. Front of the Football League Review, wasn't it?
Yeah. What was the circumstances of that? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was the year we actually got to the fifth round. We were the Giant Killers that year, funnily enough. And we played Huddersfield. We got through the first two rounds, which was lower division sides, which we'd beat. And then I got to the third round, which was Huddersfield at home. And right out of the blue, no, it was was it second or third round? Anyway, Huddersfield at home, crowd of 23,000, full house at Tranmere. And this dog ran on the field just before the game started. And nobody could catch it. And when he ran into the goal, I called him over. He came to me, I don't know why. And then I just picked him up and gave him to the bobby behind the goal. And Football League Review got a photograph of that, and it appeared on the front. I've still got that somewhere.
Yeah, it's a great incident, and I think many people remember that. And those of you that collect your programmes, go and have a look up in your loft, have a look at your Football League Review, and there he is on one of the front covers. Now then, Steve is with us, so just tell us a little bit about yourself, Steve. Then how come you're getting involved in all this statto stuff with the Albion?
Well, I've been an Albion fan since about 1967. My first game was the League Cup final at Wembley against QPR. When we famously lost 3-2 after being 2-0 up. And,
can we skip that past?
And following the Albion has been pretty much like that ever since. My interest in football and history as well. I've always had a keen interest in history, and that came from my dad. And if you don't mind me indulging a bit of family history, my great granddad, Jabez Millikamp, on my grandmother's side, actually saw the Albion play in the 1880s. He saw us play at the 4 Acres ground, amongst other things.
You were there for that, weren't you, Billy?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. You did.
So it's just
screwing studs with them little tap things.
Yeah. Just something that's always captured my imagination. So it wasn't just the football, but it was the history as well. And over the years, I've done a fair bit of research into local football history. Not initially with the Albion. I started getting interested in another prominent club of the Victorian era, the Wednesbury Old Athletic, who were one of the early giants of football in the Black Country. They sort of faded away once professionalism came in, and it was the Albion then that took over. So yeah, done a few books on local football history as well. Birmingham Senior Cup, I've always had an interest in. The West Midlands Regional League, I've done books on them as well. And then more recently, getting stuck into the early history of the Albion.
Excellent. Back in 1979, August 1979, Albion had our centenary game against Ajax. And at that time, everybody thought, nope, nothing wrong with that. Celebrate your 100 years, marvellous thing to do. But you and your mate Kev and a few others afterwards did a bit more research. And what you discovered something, didn't you?
Yeah, as you often do, if you've ever done any research into the Victorian era, particularly the 1870s and 1880s, you stumble across things by accident. 1870s, the football season only ran from October to March. There was virtually no football coverage at all in any newspapers. So when you're doing research, the other thing is, of course, back then, because there was no regular football coverage, you hadn't got the modern system where the football coverage is always on the back pages. So if you're looking through the newspapers of the era, you're just ploughing through every single page of the newspaper, column by column, and hoping to find a snippet of information. And I say about 30 years ago, I was at Smethwick Library looking through the West Bromwich Weekly News, and just stumbled across this little match report, West Bromwich Strollers against Hudson's. Didn't tell you much about the game other than it finished goalless, but it did give you the lineups, which obviously included a lot of names that certainly became famous with the Albion. You know, like, Bob Roberts, George Bell, Jimmy Stanton, Tommy Stokes, Henry Evans, who were. This is the one and only match report that's ever been traced in the name of the Strollers. But those guys I've just mentioned appear far more regularly once they operate under the name of Albion. But then, 1870s into the 1880s, and it's not till about 1883 that football starts to warrant anything approaching regular coverage in the newspapers. So a lot of the information is quite sketchy. But going back to the 1878 game, I was actually researching Wednesbury Old Athletic at the time. As far as I was aware, Albion's history was already quite well documented. People like Tony Matthews, Colin McKenzie had already produced books covering that era, albeit not necessarily in great detail. But from this discovery, I actually mentioned it to Kev Powell, who's a mate and a fellow researcher, and he took it up really. He took it up, he got in touch with Colin McKenzie, who he already communicated with. I'd never met Colin at that stage. And Colin wrote to the Albion. And because Colin was already known in Albion circles through the complete record and the centenary A to Z, I think it was, 1979. So Colin writes to say, we've found this match report. It was already well known that the Albion were previously known as the Strollers, but it would always been believed up till then that Albion had been formed in 1879, and here we've found a match report from 1878.
So how easy was it to convince the Albion then that their facts were wrong, basically?
It would appear it wasn't too difficult because no detailed research ever been done into that period really, other than Albion's progress in the FA Cup. All the other stuff is not that well documented. So Colin writes to the Albion, and it warranted a feature in the Albion News at that time, and the Albion seemed to adopt the new formation year as 1878 rather than 1879.
So anybody who's got that centenary programme against Ajax, you look at that and wow, it's quite unique, really. It's a match that should never have been played. Well, certainly not then, anyway. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's not unusual. There are a lot of other clubs who've celebrated centenaries, and then it's later been found out that it wasn't their centenary year at all. Albion are just one of several where that's happened.
Oh, well, there you go. well. So,
throw all your history books away.
Yeah.
So there we go.
So have they had to change everything in the in the East Stand or whatever? All this and by the way, and someone in little felt pen has put it's wrong date. This.
Yeah. Well, I suppose most of the redevelopment work at the Hawthorns has taken place since this discovery, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Thankfully. So
Yeah. So it's not too much of a problem.
And I see a lot of the Albion merchandise these days has got 1878 on. So yeah.
Now we'll talk a bit more later. Thanks for that, Steve. That's really interesting. Now last programme, remember, we had a great interview with Lyndon Hughes. He's an old buddy of yours, wasn't he?
He used to kick £7 of S out at Smedley Park.
Excellent. That's why I thought I would mention it. Now, it was August 50 years ago this month, August 1973, that he returned from injury, because the last time we discussed about his kidney operation, didn't we? He had a kidney removed, and he worked hard to recover and get back into the game. It was exactly 50 years ago this month that he came back for his second debut. Now, as we mentioned at the top of the programme, it's 40 years ago this month since Lyndon Hughes returned to the West Bromwich Albion first team in August in 1973 after his long layoff caused by his kidney problems. So it must have been an absolutely fantastic occasion for him to come back, Bob, actually, because many people thought perhaps he might not even be able to play again. In fact, there's one newspaper headline that actually says Hughes gambled with his life to play for Albion again.
That's right, and it as the reporter says, Randall Northam, he said it might seem melodramatic, but it was. I mean, he had 12 months off. That's what you got to remember. He'd had a season off. Albion had been relegated in that season as well, so he can't. Nobody can touch the blame for that to him. But I think it's interesting, saying that he's recovered from an operation to have a removal of the kidney, and that Blackpool game was the first one back since then. You have to remember, when he went the operation, he was cut from the small of his back to almost to his navel. And I think Lyndon has said, that it's all the muscles and all the tissues and all everything else that goes with that.
Yeah, I suppose the technology of 40 years ago, of course, is not what it is now.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And he says, Lyndon's quoted it. He said the surgeon told him if it was him, he'd carry on playing, and that's what he's going to do, and that's what he did. And he had another, almost like a second career after that.
Yeah, well, we're lucky enough to meet up with Lyndon, and this is what he had to say.
The surgeon said, in fact, that if I was a rugby player, he'd tell me he'd recommend that I cease playing. But the fact I played football, the choice was mine, provided I was aware of the risks that I took when I played. But he said, if you're a rugby player, the risk would be too great. But as a footballer, there's not many footballers who go down with kidney injuries, so you should be okay. But he said the choice is yours, so that's the choice I took.
There must have been times when you thought that was it, my career's over.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I remember lying in hospital, waiting on my own. It's quite. The only good thing I remember was the guy next to me was in such a poor state, and he had no one come to see him, and it made me feel better. The fact I could turn around and look at him and see how bad he was, cheered me up no end. And I thought, well, I'm going to go and get on with this afterwards. And that's what I did.
Yeah, I suppose talking about cheering people up, I suppose your teammates, there's good team bonding people in those days, wasn't it? So presumably a lot of them gave you loads of support.
They did. The trouble was they made me laugh. They told me jokes that made me laugh. And every time I laugh, it hurts. But they still made me laugh. They still told me jokes.
So coming back for your debut, your second debut in effect really then, for that Blackpool game, were you nervous in thinking, I could injure myself again, or we just got on with it?
No, I wasn't worried about that at all. I was more because I'd been training for a good 2 months, but I was more worried about the hardness of the pitch. I had to play in flat shoes, flat trainers, rather than studs. And I was more worried about the pitch, hurting myself on the pitch than my kidney. No, not a problem at all.
And the actual game itself, we won it. I think it was 3-2. Tony Brown scored a couple of goals.
Yeah, I played quite well as well that game, so I was quite pleased.
Then after that, you never looked back, and you were at the Albion for another couple of years.
That's right, yeah. And I'd moved from centre forward to centre half to right back, and I made my return in midfield. So they take you from that for what you will. But I think they call it a holding midfield player these days. So that's the position I played.
Yeah, and then you ended up leaving the Albion with Peterborough.
Yeah, I went to Peterborough, yeah.
So what was the circumstances of you leaving the Albion? Did you want to go, or
No, my contract finished, and two things. Firstly, I wasn't able to transfer because I'm not insurable. Secondly, my contract had finished, and they wanted Johnny Giles in my position in midfield.
Johnny Giles in your position? Never.
And he came in and did a great job. He was a brilliant player, brilliant manager, Johnny Giles. Shame he ever left West Brom.
Yeah. So how did the move to Peterborough come about?
I could have gone to about 15 clubs. I chose Peterborough because it was far enough away, and the terms were right.
They offered you more money than the others. Yeah.
Yeah. And they Noel Cantwell sold it to... Noel Cantwell was the manager, and John Marwell. They sold it to me. They were ambitious. They'd signed a few other good players as well, so it didn't quite work out. But there we are, that's such is life.
Yeah. And then after that, you had quite a serious injury again, didn't you? Which ended your career?
Yeah, well, I played on for 12 months. I had it in the second year of my contract at Peterborough, and then I played on for another 12 months, the third year. And after my contract finished then, I'd had enough, because I was on drugs, permanent drugs, to keep the swelling down off my knee, which was a ridiculous thing. So I thought now's the time to switch into something different. And I went into the wine business.
So you ended up drinking a bit too much?
No, selling it.
Selling it, sorry. I just thought you'd been on the booze.
Because of my kidney, you see. I used to get inebriated, so I couldn't drink. I had to sell it instead.
So that was a good career that you had after football. And
yes, I managed to get my diploma, which is one stage down from a Master of Wine. So I did a lot of studying in those days, and became quite a successful businessman. I got to acting regional manager of Wine Rack, which was quite good.
Well, I think we'd ought to have a drink to celebrate that, Bob, don't you?
Well, I could provide you with a bottle at the right price.
Looking back, Lyndon, have you got any regrets?
Only marrying Sylvia.
Well, we'll cut that out.
You have to take that.
Too late now, mate. It's recorded. She's looking daggers in the corner.
Football-wise, any
No.
regrets?
Not really. I think. No, I can't say.
No.
Nothing really sticks out. I mean, well, ups and downs.
Yeah.
But that's everyone has those ups and downs, like my kidneys and my injury, my knee injury. But no regrets as such. No. I've had a great time, especially as a youngster, as a young player, young professional.
Yeah.
We didn't quite work out. And of course, yes, I do have one regret. It just come to me: lack of money. No money. My first contract was £8 a week. Nowadays, I'd start on about.
So you imagine now, an 18-year-old who's played schoolboy international 5 times.
Leading scorer.
Yeah, leading goal scorer.
Captain of your
Captain of your country. How much would you have been worth now?
Well, at one stage, that someone told me they offered 60,000 for me, when the record fee was 100,000. But it was turned down by West Brom.
They turned down 60,000.
Yeah. That's what they told me. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, the fact
And
that
it was a reputable manager who told me that.
So that just shows everyone the high esteem that West Bromwich Albion out
It's
of
hard
you.
to relate to the transfer from those days to these days. It's hard to relate. So.
But I mean, we were talking earlier on about Colin Suggett going for 100,000. You're only 40,000 below that.
Yeah.
That puts you in a very big line. Puts you in a very good in the spotlight, basically, because that just shows that what Albion thought of you and what the managers thought of you.
That's right, yeah. And what other clubs thought of me as well when I left West Brom. There was about 16 clubs, at least 16, maybe 17, were interested in me. So, yeah, what will be, will be.
And that's a good end, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that. That's good.
Yeah, that's been, Lyndon, it's been absolutely wonderful to listen to you.
So I think my voice is a bit...
No, don't worry about that. It's the memories you bring back that you've got to remember, and we will do our best to make sure people remember it as well.
Edit it professionally.
Yeah. No, but I mean...
Cut out a bit of that still here.
It's been really good, Lyndon.
Okay, well,
It really has been good.
Yeah, it's quite nostalgic. I really did enjoy going across and seeing Lyndon, and I know you enjoyed it too, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I was a reporter on the Midland Chronicle when he made his... he got his call up for England schoolboys, and I got to know his dad very well, and you know he organised a trip, and I went down, and I was able to be part of that day with the Hughes family, which was something you always treasure, and I always followed him no matter what he did. You know, when he left the Albion, you'd always follow him because of that association I had with him when he was a schoolboy international.
Excellent. Yeah. So Lyndon Hughes there, that was his second debut 50 years ago this month at Blackpool. Now, talking of Blackpool, there's a nice little funny clip here. Many people will remember, well, in fact, know rather, because he's still around, obviously, Laurie Rampling, who is the big Albion photographer. And he had quite a bit of a unique experience at Blackpool once when he was lined up beside the goal, ready to start snapping away, and suddenly the ball comes running towards him.
Unusual funny things. I mean, oh dear me. Well, the funniest thing is, and I'm reminded of this so often, if I go into a pub with the lads, if I go into if I'm close to the lads that can remember it, always remember. We went to Blackpool and we beat them there. Was it 2-1 in a night match? I think it was. 3-1, maybe 3-2. I can't remember the score. You asked me about a result in 1931. I'll tell you straight off like that. Ask me a result perhaps nearer to. I can't remember. Anyway, but I'm there with my great friend Tim Eastoke and Dave Hamilton. Dave Hamilton's the Express and Star photographer. Tim Eastoke is the doyen in photography of the Birmingham Mail. I tell you what, there ain't many better photographers than Tim Eastoke. Frage is one, but anyway, I'm sitting there, and we're sitting behind the boards at at Blackpool. You had the temporary stand there before they had that stand built there. So it's there, and then the stewards come and said to us, right. We want you to go in front of the boards. Why is that? So we think the Albion fans might rush down at the end of the game. I said, oh, do us a favour. That ain't going to happen. They don't know. He said, well, we want you to do that. So we're going to give you the signal when we want you to get up and go in front of the boards. So anyway, we get the signal, and I stand up, and just as the fullback, it was the Dutch... Belgian fullback, the right back played for us. Anyway, I think. Yeah. But he cleared the ball into that, and I am now standing up. And as I'm standing up, I've got my camera and my pod in front of me, okay? And the ball hits me fair and square on the head, and Tim will tell you, I go back, literally, my whole body went back. Right back, and I'm behind the balls there. I'm boom, and I crashed on the ground, and my camera was still in my hand as I fallen back, and I was out. I was out like a light, and I was out like a. And all the lads come down, and they were helping me, and they laughed, and I mean, couldn't remember too much about it at the time, but oh dear me, but that, and Tim, even to this day now, you're steering away from football. That's about the funniest. And the even funnier thing was I'd come up with Dave Bowler, Stuart Curtis, and that all worked for the club in the car, and I was instructed I had to go and see our club doctor, which was Kevin Conrad, even then. And I went over to see Kev, and Kevin said, "You ought to go to hospital and get checked, Lowell." I said, "Kev, if I go to hospital and get checked, the other lads are going to go home. How am I going to get home from Blackpool?" I said, "Because I'm going to be there overnight and I'm going to be stranded." So he said, "OK, well, I'll let you go back with them, but I want you to phone me first thing in the morning, let me know you're OK, and make sure you go and go to see your doctor and ask him to check you out." So I did that. But that, I think, funny things. There's lots of amusing things that have happened to me in my time, but that one is one that strikes a chord, not just with me, but with other people. Yeah. With Tim Eastoe, every time I see him, reminds me. Dave Hamilton, every time I see him, reminds me. The lads, I went into a pub at Fulham when we drew 1-1 with all the lads. And I remember I walked through the door and they had all the big cheer, and one lad shouted, "We got a football, duck!" I think that's probably the funniest thing. That's going. Even I have a laugh. I'll laugh about it. I've had a few other mishaps, like falling down camera pits and injuring myself and smashing cameras and one thing and another. I don't count them as funny things, but when you look back at them now, in the whole scheme of life, they're quite hilarious.
Yeah, quite hilarious indeed then, although it wouldn't have been hilarious at the time being smacked in the face by the ball, I don't suppose. But it would have been hilarious if you were beyond the goal watching it, I suppose. Now, talking of watching a game, we spoke recently to Alan Maull, who's a big Albion fan, and he'd been across to Vancouver. And you'll like this story as well, Billy, because what he did, he discovered, he went to see Vancouver Whitecaps play, which is where Willie Johnston used to play, amongst other ex-players from our country. And there's actually a Willie Johnston corner at the ground. And it came about when, during the course of one game, a fan offered him a drink of beer, and he just he went across, picked up the beer, had a swig of beer before he took the corner, and there was a goal. And this is what Alan had to say about it.
Well, we went to the game, Vancouver. They were playing Seattle, and I got there really early, so I wanted to take some photos of the ground. And when I looked up the corner, there was a big banner, and it said Willie's Corner, and there was on the banner was a picture of Willie Johnson with his arms held up in the air. And I started thinking back, and I do remember the incident, and it's actually on YouTube. They were playing in a game, and there was just seconds left, and I think it was one each, and they got a corner, and they was telling Willie to hurry up. The clock was counting down, and he went over to the corner to take it, and a guy in the crowd offered him a bottle of beer. So he stopped and started drinking the beer, and the players are going, "Willie, Willie, Willie." Anyway, he drunk the beer. You can see it on YouTube, and he puts it back on the wall of the stand, and then takes the corner, puts it straight on the striker's head. He headed it in the net, and the referee blew for time, and they won 2-1. It was literally seconds to go, but Willie stopped to have a bottle of beer, and apparently now this stand, it's like a family enclosure, and it's called Willie's Corner. But what I didn't realise, Ellen pointed out to me, there's a guy that goes, a well-known supporter like, and he makes placards, and in the second half, Seattle was attacking our end where we were, down by Willie's Corner, and Vancouver won 2-0. But there was about 15 minutes left, and they had a corner, and when the guy come over with a ball to put it down on the quadrant, the guy held a placard up and it said, "You're now Willie Johnson." And I just think, after all these years, the guy makes the placards, doesn't he? And they're still fanatic.
All these years, they still think a bit like that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, because I had my West Brom cap on, everybody wanted to talk to us about Willie, really, and about the Albion, and like I say, the supporters club scarves have got Vancouver Albion on because of Willie and the connection with West Brom, and I just thought it was amazing.
Amazing indeed. It would have been great there to have seen that as well. But you can find that clip on YouTube. So you looked at it yourself.
I've already seen it, yeah. And it's quite a dramatic moment as well, because it's right in the last minute of an important game.
Yep, excellent stuff. But now, this is it, Billy.
Okay,
this is the moment we've all
quiz.
been waiting for. It's the quiz of the week.
Yay!
Right, now, this is the 4th time of doing this. And Steve, you're up against Bob. And I must tell you, I don't think Bob's lost yet, has he?
Hey?
Well, it's sort of questionable, the last one.
Here we go. 10
He's kicking me under the table.
10 quick fire questions. Keep the score then, Billy. Here we go. So, shout out the answers. Bob versus Steve. So, number 1. Who made his Albion debut in August 2004? He came all the way from Budapest.
Zoltan Gera.
Zoltan Gera.
Okay.
Number 2. A man with Villa connections joined the Albion in August 1983. Who was that?
Tony Morley.
Not Tony
Ken
Morley.
McNaught.
Ken McNaught.
Yeah.
Ken McNaught.
Ooh.
2
Come
nil.
on, Bob.
Hey.
Right, number
Wake up,
3.
Wake up, Downey.
Made his debut in August 93, and a man who later saved us at Portsmouth.
Lee Ashcroft.
Lee Ashcroft. Woof.
Peggy.
Half a point.
Half a point for that, okay?
That might have been his auntie, hadn't it?
It could have been, yeah. Number 4, became a BBC pundit, and he debuted for the Albion in August 85. Garth Crooks.
Oh, nearly there.
Hey,
nearly
this is
Bob.
way beyond me. This is well before my era. This is.
Number 5.
I was on the GGs by now.
Right. Played on loan for the Albion in August 2018, and he just made himself a big move to Newcastle.
Harvey Barnes.
Harvey Barnes.
Is that a bonus point there?
Bonus
'Cause
point
he's-
there.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
go on
so,
then.
actually.
10 bonus points. I got his first name.
Okay, number 6. Who was our goalkeeper? He'll be 67 this month. He sort of debuted in March in 1977.
Tony Godden.
Tony Godden.
Yeah.
Tony Godden it is.
Who was that? I don't get that
Tony
because they're
Godden.
both very
Steve.
quick.
Steve
Steve, is
just
it?
gets in there. And number 7. This week it's a happy birthday to an Albion youth from 1977 who was born in Great Bar. And I think he played about 200 odd games for the Albion.
Born in Great Bar.
Good local lad, Martin.
Martin Bennett.
Martin Bennett. Good, Martin Bennett. Number 8, August 1977. Rotherham United, 2nd round of the League Cup. Who burst onto the scene?
Cyril Regis.
Cyril Regis. Number 9, in August 1978. The first match of the season at home to Ipswich. We couldn't have had a better start because the Albion scored after just 22 seconds. Quickest goal of the season.
Brown.
Got it again.
Who was that?
This is Steve.
Ali Brown.
Ali Brown.
Ali Brown with the answer. Steve with the answer.
What nationality was he, Bob?
English, I hope.
Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was he? Oh,
Yeah.
six
He came from-
six bonus points then for that. It's really
I mean, he came from Leicester, didn't he?
That's worth a
Ooh.
bonus. That's a good bonus point there. So what's the score now then, Billy?
Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. It's 80.
Oh, 80.
It's a tie break.
Right now then. This is it. Last question. Who was the Albion great that was born in August 1883?
Jesse
One-
Pennington.
Jesse Pennington.
Oh.
Correct.
Oh,
Steve.
Steve just picked him at the
Steve
post.
is just in there to
Just
win
in
the
on the
quiz.
post. Wow.
Wow.
Oh, I don't know. Well,
You can't get much closer
Bad
than
luck,
that.
Bob.
can you?
Thought he did really well then.
And that, folks, is our quiz of the week.
This is the Throstle Club with Norman Bartlam and Bob Downing.
Yeah, now, so it was such a long time ago, Jesse Pennington, but it's a name that's got fabulous links with Albion's past, and most Albion fans have heard of him, Steve, haven't they?
They have, yeah. He was an England international. Played. I prefer to say he played 25 times for England. I mean, most people these days talk about caps, but of course in Pennington's era, you didn't get a cap for every appearance. You'd get one cap per season.
Oh, right.
Because normally you'd be playing England, Wales, and Ireland as it was then. If you played one match, you got one cap. If you played in all 3 matches, you still got one cap. So I prefer to call it appearances.
Mm-hmm.
He did, for many years, hold the record for the most league appearances by an Albion player, 455. He never scored a goal. He was obviously very much a left-back of his era. His job was to defend. I could well imagine he never got far enough forward to even have a pot at goal.
That's interesting, because nowadays it's the strikers that don't score the goals.
Yeah, I mean, you imagine in our time, probably the best left back we've had in my lifetime was Derek Statham, but he was an attacking left back and did weigh in with the odd goal. But yeah, Pennington was very much a defensive player. Won a league championship medal. 1920, the only time Albion had been champions of the entire country. Had won the second division championship with Albion 9 years earlier. I was on the losing side in the FA Cup final against Barnsley when they'd drawn 0-0 at the Crystal Palace, and the replay was at the replay against Barnsley was at neutral Sheffield.
Oh, yeah.
The first game it finished 0-0. The second game was 0-0. It went into extra time. There was about a minute left, and it was still 0-0. And then in the last minute, I think Harry Tufnell burst through, and Pennington's there trying to dispossess him and failed. And Tufnell gets through and scored. I mean, these days Pennington would have any fullback would have just brought Tufnell down, took the red card, and you get a defensive wall.
That's right. Now, he was applauded through the national press the day after, wasn't he, for that, because of his good sportsmanship?
That's right, yeah. And there's a very good interview on the Albion History DVD from about 2005-06, where they say, he was a gentleman. He tried to dispossess Tufnell fairly and failed, and Albion lost the cup final. It just wouldn't happen these days, would it?
No. Nope. Now, talking of cup finals, there's a really interesting cup final with a bit of a difference in August of 1971, wasn't it? It was the Watney Cup final.
The Watney Cup, I think ran for about 4 years, and it was the 2 top scoring teams in each of the 4 divisions of the Football League, excluding any clubs that have been promoted, relegated or qualified for Europe. So the Albion got in 1971, having scored enough goals under Alan Ashman. Of course, we'd have never scored enough goals under Don Howe to qualify. There were some surprise results in that season, in that pre-season competition, and not just involving the Albion, because in the first round, Halifax Town had beaten Manchester United, whose team included Best, Law and Charlton. Nearly 20,000 people at the Shea to see that. Halifax then lost at home to Albion in the semi-final, and then that left Albion with a home final against 4th Division Colchester United. So I remember I was there that day, fully expecting us to see us win a cup.
Yeah,
and it didn't happen.
It didn't happen, did it? No, it did go to a penalty. Wasn't it the first penalty shootout ever as well? Wasn't it? I think
it was the first penalty shootout that I'm aware of in a proper competition. There was no extra time. It just went straight to penalties, which is what they're starting to do these days. And Albion, went behind, went 2-1 up, equalised with 3-2 up at half time. Colchester equalised in the second half, and then with a few minutes remaining, Colchester went in front. And then the very last minute, Albion equalised from a corner. The ball just came through a crowd of players. I think it hit Jeff Astle on the shin and went through a defender's legs.
That counts.
Yeah, they all count, don't they? Yeah. The crowd were ecstatic, because it looked like we were going to lose. And then went to penalties.
That was really interesting. We were talking to Jim Cumbes about that, weren't we?
Yeah.
With Bob. And even though it was sponsored by the Watney Cup, we jokingly said Watney Man's the red barrel and all that. So did you get a few barrels in the dressing room after? He said, no, we got a key ring.
The one thing about Steve as well with the Watney Cup final was the experiment with the offside law, wasn't it?
I believe that the offside, you can only be offside in the penalty area.
That's right.
Interesting experiment. It didn't catch on, obviously.
No. I think Jim was saying that it stretched the game a bit, but the defenders had to pull back because the forwards pushed right up to the edge of the penalty area, so there was no midfield, so it was just long ball upfield, so it wasn't the most exciting of football.
It's like the old ping pong on the football machines, dong, 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 that sort of thing.
Yep.
But
So
it's never going to catch on.
No, it certainly didn't, and I think it went on for a couple of more years after that, didn't it? Then it finished, I think, Steve.
I think these tournaments were useful for experimenting with stuff like that. But it was never adopted afterwards.
Yeah. Now then, you mentioned a fellow statto of yours, Colin McKenzie, earlier on, and he'd been in touch with a bit of feedback from something we mentioned in an earlier programme, all about the Everest family. And though the Albion secretaries over the years, there are about 90 years between them on connection with West Bromwich Albion, and he's given us little appreciation of the Everest family. So the Everest family had a long association then with West Bromwich Albion?
Absolutely, 90 years in fact. Fred was in charge of secretarial matters from 1896 onwards, and then his brother-in-law took over when Fred retired, and then Alan Everest, Fred's son, he became secretary and director until 1986, so you've got 90 years. It's an incredible record.
But in effect, Fred was a bit more than just the secretary, wasn't he? Because he was helping to, the directors picked the team, but in effect he was the unofficial manager, wasn't he, at the start?
That's absolutely correct, although not at the beginning. He was an office boy to start with, and then worked his way up. And when Frank Heaven left Albion, he was given the job.
So tell people who was Frank Heaven.
Frank Heaven was the secretary of Albion from 1896 to 1902. But he left under slightly unfortunate circumstances, and they gave Fred the job temporarily, and then realised that they had a bit of a nugget, and. So they allowed him to carry on.
Okay, and not many people perhaps remember the name Fred Everest, but they remember the name Alan Everest, and there's a family connection.
That's right.
There?
Well, there's his son. One of his sons. There are two sons. One was an RAF pilot who was interned during the war, and then there was a daughter, and then there's Alan Everest was the youngest, and he became an assistant in the offices in 1934. So. And then he was working under his uncles, Uncle Ephraim Smith, who took over, and then took over himself as secretary.
And he was there till the mid-80s, wasn't he?
Yeah, 1986, yeah. So as well, director as well, yeah.
So it's an astonishing record.
Well, I don't think it's been beaten by any other family at all. I think that's a unique record.
So I suppose Fred was what you'd call an all-round good egg, wasn't he? And he got involved with all sorts of activities connected with the Albion.
He certainly did. He was a part-time linesman in one match at Hull City in 1906 when the linesman didn't turn up. So the two secretaries tossed the coin to see who would run the line. And Fred won it. So he ran the line, but Albion lost 4-0.
Lost 4-0?
Yes.
So losing 4-0, so I'm not surprised that he didn't run the line again after that. Now, Steve has just mentioned something to us again about the cup there from the Watney Cup, but I'll cut you off. You were going to tell us that Jim Cumbes actually saved a penalty, didn't he?
Yeah,
in the shootout.
I think the penalty shootout mirrored the game itself. Tony Brown unusually missed his first penalty. It was saved by the keeper, but ordered to be retaken. He scored, Colchester equalised, Astleborough was ahead, Colchester equalised. Colchester equalised actually. I think the Colchester player Gibbs missed the penalty, but Jim Cumbes had moved, so they retook it and he scored. Then Ray Wilson missed for the Albion. Bobby Cram, who used to play for the Albion, took the penalty for Colchester, which was saved by Jim Cumbes.
An interesting thing, that it was actually on Match of the Day, and Match of the Day was on early that night, wasn't it?
Yeah. I checked this the other day on the National Newspaper Archive because I was wondering whether I'd dreamt it. But yeah, Match of the Day aired at 6:20 that evening instead of the usual 10 o'clock. I've no idea why.
In competition with the Argus?
Well, one was pink and the other was what in his red.
Yeah, that's right,
yeah. Anyway, talking of broadcasting, as we were in a way, brings us round to sad events of recent days, and death of both Tony Butler and Trevor Francis, both well-known footballing pundits in different ways. So Tony Butler was a great icon, wasn't he, Bob?
He was. Basically, Tony Butler started the phoning. Everything was down to that. Nobody had ever done it before. They tried it in various ways, but Tony had got this way with him, and he came across so well on the radio. He was all right on television as well, but he came across so well, and he interacted with the fans. It wasn't a case of, well, what do you think about this? Tony would give his view, and then he'd encourage people to sort of expand on that view, and he'd argue with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a case, oh, well, we'll take that. But no, if Tony thought they were wrong, he'd tell them they were wrong.
Yeah.
And you got the famous things where, that you get somebody call up and say, a Villa fan or a Blues fan or an Albion fan, and they'd say to Tony, get down the Blues and tell them this is what. And he'd probably, I'll go down there. He probably never did, but the fans all thought he did.
Mm.
And that was the power of the man. And I worked with him for a short time when I was working for the Mail, and I was doing horse racing at the time, and the Mail had started their own little, I think it was Birmingham TV or something like that. It was in the very early
Birmingham
days.
TV, yeah. Live TV, yeah. And he came across exactly the same, but he was such a nice, friendly bloke. But he got that personality that was absolutely tailor-made for phone-ins. That's right. Now, any of you have got programmes going back to the 70s, have a look in April 1978 in the game against Everton, and there's a smashing interview with Tony Butler in that, which is really worth having a look at. Now, unfortunately, we ain't got much time left. We've only got about a minute, haven't we, Billy?
Yeah, about a minute.
Blimey. So there's lots more that we could talk about, and we'll perhaps hold some stuff over to our September programme. And in the meantime, all it means to say really is thanks to everybody that's helped us to do the programme today. Billy,
it's been really
Bob,
interesting.
and
thanks
Steve.
Yeah,
first time you've been here, Steve. First time you've done a radio thing as well.
It
wasn't
is.
So
Is
yeah,
he?
Enjoyed that.
He's done great.
Yeah, he's reached 21 and he's done his first ever TV radio interview.
Nice.
And we're going to try and see if we can get Wayne Faraday, I think, for the next programme.
Yeah.
It's not confirmed yet, but we're going to have a go and see if we can try and do that on the next edition of the Throstle Club, which will begin out on Black Country Xtra. Also on Black Country Radio from time to time, Billy.
Will be, and we'll notify you when it's on Black Country Radio.
Yep, and also on my own website, TNT News.